The asteroid mining station Kepler-7 floated in the endless black of space, its hull scarred by decades of cosmic debris and neglect. Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided the mining laser through another chunk of worthless rock. 23 years old, and this was his life. Drilling holes in space rocks for credits that barely kept him fed. The other miners called him lucky as a joke. Lucky to still be alive after 3 cave-ins. Lucky to have avoided the lung rot that killed most miners by 30. Lucky to be stuck on the worst station in the outer rim with no way home to Earth. Marcus had stopped finding the nickname funny years ago. "Chen, get over here," barked Supervisor Kralik, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on Marcus. "Found something weird in Section C7. Looks like debris from an old wreck." Marcus sealed his mining suit and floated through the station's cramped corridors toward the indicated section. The station creaked and groaned around him, held together by prayers and cheap welding. Through the viewport, he could see the latest asteroid they were carving up, a massive gray boulder the size of a city block. Section C7 was one of the deeper mining shafts, where the artificial gravity was weaker and the air recyclers struggled to keep up. Marcus activated his helmet's light and descended into the tunnel carved by previous mining operations. The walls were rough and uneven, showing the scars left by plasma cutters and drilling equipment. 30 meters down, he found what Kralik was talking about. Embedded in the asteroid's rocky surface was what looked like a piece of metal. Definitely artificial. It had a strange golden color that seemed to shimmer even under the harsh LED lights. Marcus ran his scanner over it and frowned at the readings. The metal was unlike anything in the database. "This is weird," he muttered into his comm. "Showing composition unknown. Really old, though. Scanner says at least 2,000 years. "Just cut it out and bring it up," Kralik's voice crackled back. "Probably worth something to the artifact hunters on Titan Station." Marcus fired up his plasma cutter and carefully carved around the metal fragment. As the beam cut into the surrounding rock, he noticed something else glinting deeper in the cavity. Setting the cutter aside, he used a pry bar to clear away the loose stone. What he found made him forget to breathe for a moment. It was a sword. Not some energy weapon or plasma blade like the military used, but an actual sword with a metal blade and handle. The weapon was ancient, its surface covered in rust and corrosion, yet somehow it felt significant. Heavy. Important. Along the blade, strange symbols were etched into the metal, too worn to read clearly. Marcus lifted the sword from its stone prison, surprised by how perfectly balanced it felt in his hands. Despite the rust, the weapon seemed solid, well-made. The handle was wrapped in some kind of synthetic material that had somehow survived whatever catastrophe had buried this thing in the asteroid. "Chen, what's taking so long down there?" Kralik's voice made him jump. "Found something else," Marcus replied, staring at the sword. "Some kind of old weapon." "Weapon? Bring it up." Corporate's always interested in ancient military tech. As Marcus climbed back toward the main station, the sword secured to his tool belt, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The metal fragment and the sword clearly came from the same source. A ship, maybe. But what kind of ship carried swords in an age of plasma rifles and particle beams? Back on the station, Marcus laid his discoveries on the examination table in the small lab space. Kralik looked them over with his good eye while his cybernetic implant ran detailed scans. "Metals unknown to standard databases," Kralik muttered, reading the display. "But look at this craftsmanship. Even rusted, you can see the quality. This isn't some primitive weapon." Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's science officer, pushed her way into the crowded lab space. She was one of the few people on Kepler-7 with a real education, though Marcus had never learned what circumstances had landed her on a mining station in the middle of nowhere. "Fascinating," she said, running her own scanner over the sword. "The alloy composition is incredibly sophisticated. This rust isn't really rust at all. It's some kind of protective coating that's partially degraded over time. Protective coating? Marcus asked. The sword's still functional underneath, Kim explained. Whatever civilization made this new metallurgy far beyond what we use today, and these symbols... She paused, studying the worn markings. They look almost familiar, like something I've seen before. Over the next few hours, Kim worked to clean and analyze the sword while Marcus returned to his regular mining duties. But his mind kept drifting back to the ancient weapon. There was something about finding it that felt like destiny, like it was meant to happen. That evening, Kim called him back to the lab. The sword lay on the table, and she had managed to clean away much of the surface corrosion. Underneath, the metal gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "This is incredible," Kim said, her voice filled with excitement. "The metal is some kind of smart alloy. It responds to bioelectric fields. And Marcus, I figured out what these symbols are." She activated a holographic display showing ancient star charts and historical records. These markings aren't just decorative. They're coordinates, star positions, and according to the historical database, they match the location of a stellar phenomenon that occurred exactly 2,000 years ago. "What kind of phenomenon?" Marcus asked, though part of him already suspected the answer would change everything. "The collapse of the Terran Empire," Kim said quietly. "Marcus, I think this sword belonged to someone very important. Someone from the old empire that ruled half the galaxy before the Great Collapse." Marcus picked up the sword again, feeling that strange sense of rightness as his fingers closed around the handle. The metal seemed to warm under his touch, and for just a moment he could swear he heard something. A whisper, a voice calling from across 2,000 years of silence. "There's more," Kim continued. "I found references to a legend. They say when the Empire fell, the last emperor's ship was lost in battle. His personal effects were scattered across space, and according to the legend, whoever found his sword would have the right to reclaim the imperial throne." Marcus stared at her. "That's just a legend." "Maybe," Kim said. "But legends have power, Marcus, and there are people out there who still remember the Empire, still believe in what it represented. The sword is proof of legitimacy that could rally millions of people across the galaxy." "You're talking about starting a rebellion." "I'm talking about giving humanity hope again," Kim replied. "Do you know what the galaxy looks like now? Hundreds of alien species treating humans like second-class citizens. Our colonies stripped of resources. Our people forced into labor camps or worse. The Galactic Council doesn't even pretend to care about human rights anymore." Marcus had heard the stories. Everyone had. After the Empire fell, humanity had become just another client species in the galaxy. Weak, scattered, ignored by the powerful alien civilizations that carved up human space between them. "Even if the legend is true," Marcus said slowly, "I'm nobody, a miner from nowhere. I wouldn't know the first thing about being an emperor." "Maybe that's exactly what humanity needs," Kim said. "Not another politician or military leader, someone who knows what it's like to struggle, someone who understands what ordinary people face every day." Marcus looked down at the sword in his hands. The weapon seemed heavier now, weighted with possibility and responsibility. Part of him wanted to put it down and walk away. Go back to his simple life of mining asteroids and staying out of trouble. But another part of him, a part that had been growing stronger since the moment he first touched the sword, whispered that this was his moment, his chance to be more than just Lucky, the miner. That night, Marcus lay on his narrow bunk, staring at the sword propped against the wall beside him. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images that didn't belong to him. Massive fleets of ships bearing the golden eagle symbol of the Terran Empire. Worlds where humans stood proud and free. The last emperor, a man whose face Marcus couldn't quite make out, falling in battle as his empire crumbled around him. Were they memories, dreams, or something else entirely? The next morning brought news that changed everything. Supervisor Kralik burst into the miners' quarters, his face pale and his cybernetic eye flickering erratically. "Corporate just sent word," he announced. "Galactic Council inspectors are coming. Full inspection of the station and all personnel. They'll be here in 6 hours." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Council inspectors didn't come to remote mining stations for routine checks. Someone had talked. Someone had reported the discovery of Imperial artifacts. "What do we do?" asked Pavel, one of the older miners. "We do our jobs and keep our mouths shut," Kralik said. But his eyes found Marcus across the room, and the message was clear: hide the sword or face the consequences. Marcus spent the next hour in his quarters, staring at the ancient weapon and trying to decide what to do. He could hide it in the asteroid mines, bury it so deep that no inspector would ever find it. Or he could surrender it to the authorities and hope they showed mercy. But as he held the sword, feeling its weight and warmth, Marcus realized he couldn't do either of those things. The weapon wasn't just an artifact anymore. It was a symbol, a promise, a chance for humanity to remember what it once was and could be again. When the Council inspection ship docked with Kepler-7, Marcus was waiting for them in the main airlock. The sword hung at his side, no longer hidden but displayed openly for all to see. He had cleaned his mining suit and stood as straight as he could, trying to look like something more than a scared young man pretending to be an emperor. Dr. Kim stood beside him, having made her own choice to stand with him regardless of the consequences. Behind them, to Marcus's surprise, stood every miner on the station. Word had spread quickly about what the sword represented, and one by one they had chosen to make their stand. The airlock cycled open, and 3 figures stepped through. 2 were human, wearing the dark uniforms of Council security forces. The third was clearly alien, its tall insectoid frame draped in the flowing robes of a Council administrator. "I am Administrator Vexthul," the alien said, its translated voice carrying an unmistakable tone of authority and contempt. "We have received reports of illegal Imperial artifacts being discovered at this facility." Marcus stepped forward, his hand resting on the sword's handle. "My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm here to inform you that this facility and everyone on it are now under the protection of the Terran Empire." The alien's compound eyes fixed on him with what might have been amusement. "The Terran Empire ceased to exist 2 millennia ago, human. You are in possession of stolen artifacts and are interfering with Council authority. Surrender the items immediately or face the consequences." "No," Marcus said simply. The word seemed to echo in the airlock, carrying more weight than he had intended. Administrator Vexthul chittered what was probably laughter. "One primitive mining station with a handful of humans thinks it can challenge the Galactic Council? You have no ships, no weapons, no allies. What exactly do you think you can accomplish?" Marcus drew the sword, and immediately the atmosphere in the airlock changed. The ancient weapon seemed to glow with its own inner light, casting long shadows on the walls. He could feel the power flowing through it, connecting him to something vast and ancient and unbreakably strong. "I can give humanity something it's been missing for 2,000 years, Marcus said, his voice carrying a confidence he didn't know he possessed. "Hope." The standoff in the airlock lasted only moments before Administrator Vexthul made his decision. His security officers raised their plasma rifles, but Marcus was already moving. The sword in his hands felt alive, guiding his movements with an instinctive knowledge he shouldn't have possessed. The first energy blast passed inches from his head as he ducked and spun. The sword's edge caught the second rifle, slicing through the weapon's barrel like it was made of paper. The officer stumbled backward in shock, staring at his ruined weapon. "Impossible!" Vexthul hissed. "No primitive blade can cut through military-grade plasma conduits." Marcus advanced on the remaining officer, the sword humming with energy. "This isn't a primitive blade," he said. "This is the sword of the Terran Empire, forged from metals that don't exist in your databases, powered by the will of humanity itself." The second officer's shot went wide as Dr. Kim tackled him from behind. In seconds, both security officers were disarmed and restrained by the miners, who had armed themselves with cutting tools and mining equipment. Administrator Vexthul backed toward the airlock, his compound eyes reflecting the strange light emanating from Marcus's sword. "You have just declared war on the Galactic Council," he said. "Every species in the galaxy will hunt you down." "Let them come," Marcus replied. "Humanity has been hiding in the shadows for too long." But as the council ship departed with its humiliated delegation, Marcus knew they had perhaps hours before the real response arrived. The council wouldn't tolerate open rebellion, especially from humans claiming imperial authority. "We need to get off this station," Dr. Kim said, as they watched the council ship disappear into hyperspace. "They'll be back with warships." "Where can we go?" asked Pavel. "Every human world in the galaxy is under council authority." Marcus looked down at the sword, still glowing faintly in his hands. The weapon seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, and with each pulse, new knowledge flooded into his mind. Star charts, battle tactics, the locations of hidden Imperial caches scattered across the galaxy. "The Forge worlds," he said suddenly. "The old Imperial shipyards in the Centauri cluster. They were abandoned after the collapse, deemed too dangerous to salvage." Kim's eyes widened. "That's suicide. The radiation levels alone would kill anyone who went near those systems." "Not anyone," Marcus said, understanding coming to him like a half-remembered dream. "The Imperial sword keys, the access codes. It's designed to protect the bearer from Imperial security systems." Over the next 2 hours, they worked frantically to prepare for departure. Kepler-7 had 2 small transport ships, barely capable of interstellar flight. They weren't military vessels, but they would have to do. As the miners loaded supplies and equipment, Marcus found himself drawn to the observation deck overlooking the asteroid field. The sword hung at his side, its weight becoming more familiar with each passing hour. He could feel it changing him, awakening something that had been dormant in human DNA for 2 millennia. Having second thoughts, Dr. Kim joined him at the viewport. "Every few minutes," Marcus admitted. "This morning I was a miner. Tonight I'm apparently the self-declared emperor of humanity. It's a lot to process." "The sword chose you," Kim said. "According to the legends, Imperial artifacts can only be awakened by someone with the right bloodline, the right genetic markers." Marcus turned to her. "You're saying I'm actually descended from the old emperors?" "I'm saying it's possible. After the Empire fell, the Imperial family scattered across the galaxy, changed their names, hid among the general population. Your great-great-grandfather could have been a prince and you'd never know it." The thought was overwhelming. Marcus had grown up believing he was nobody special. The son of failed colonists who died in a transport accident when he was 12. An orphan who survived by taking whatever jobs he could find. "It doesn't matter what my bloodline is," he said finally. "What matters is what we do next." Before Kim could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as Supervisor Kralich's voice echoed from the speakers. "Council ships approaching. Multiple contacts. All hands to evacuation stations immediately." Through the viewport, Marcus could see them coming. Not just one ship this time, but an entire battle group. Sleek Council destroyers flanked by larger cruisers, their weapons already powering up for bombardment. "So much for having ours," Kim muttered. They ran for the docking bay where the other miners were already boarding the transport ships. The vessels were overloaded with people and supplies, but there was no choice. Stay and face the Council fleet, or flee into space with barely enough life support to reach the nearest system. Marcus was the last to board the lead transport, pausing at the airlock to take one final look at Kepler-7. The station had been a prison, but it had also been home for 3 years. Now it would be destroyed, another casualty of humanity's struggle for freedom. The transport ships launched just as the Council fleet opened fire. Marcus watched through a porthole as plasma beams lanced through space, reducing the mining station to expanding clouds of debris. If they had delayed their departure by even 10 minutes, they would all be dead. "Hyperspace jump in 30 seconds, announced Captain Torres, the transport's pilot. "Everyone hold on." The ships jumped to light speed just as Council fighters closed in on their position. For a moment, the stars stretched into lines of light, and then they were in the gray emptiness between systems. "Where to, Your Majesty?" Torres asked, and Marcus realized the captain wasn't being sarcastic. Word of the sword and what it represented had spread quickly among the miners. "The Centauri cluster," Marcus replied. "The old Forge worlds." Torres's face went pale. "Sir, those systems are interdicted. The radiation will kill us before we even reach orbit." "Trust me," Marcus said, his hand moving instinctively to the sword's handle. "We'll be protected." The journey to Centauri took 18 hours through hyperspace. During that time, Marcus learned more about the refugees he now led. 43 people in total, mostly miners and support staff from Kepler-7. Men and women who had lived their entire lives under Council authority, accepting their second-class status because they had no choice. Dr. Kim spent the journey studying the sword's energy readings and the historical records she had downloaded from the station's database. What she found both excited and terrified her. "The sword isn't just a symbol," she told Marcus in the transport's tiny briefing room. "It's a key. A literal key to Imperial technology that's been dormant for 2,000 years. "What kind of technology?" Marcus asked. "Everything. Ship construction facilities, weapon foundries, automated defense systems. According to these records, the Forge worlds contained enough industrial capacity to build 1,000 warships. All of it powered down and waiting for someone with Imperial authority to reactivate it." Marcus studied the star charts displayed on the small screen. The Centauri cluster was a group of 7 star systems, each containing massive space-based construction facilities. Before the Empire's fall, they had been the primary source of humanity's military might. "The Council knows about the Forge worlds," Kim continued. "They've known for centuries, but they've never been able to access the facilities because they lack the proper authorization codes. And you think the sword contains those codes?" "I think the sword is those codes," Kim said. "A living key that can awaken sleeping giants." When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri cluster, the sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrifying. 7 stars hung in perfect formation, surrounded by the skeletal remains of massive construction platforms. Even after 2 millennia of abandonment, the Forge worlds were clearly visible as geometric patterns against the cosmic background. "Radiation levels are off the charts," reported Torres. "We'll be cooked alive if we get any closer." Marcus drew the sword, and immediately the transport's sensors registered a change. The radiation readings began dropping as an invisible field extended from the weapon, creating a protective bubble around both ships. "Well," Torres said quietly, "I guess you really are the Emperor." They approached the nearest Forge world slowly, marveling at the scale of the ancient construction. The facility was larger than most space stations, a vast framework of metal and composite materials that stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Docking ports, manufacturing bays, and weapons platforms hung in the void like sleeping dragons. As their ships drew closer, lights began flickering to life throughout the facility. Systems that had been dormant for 2,000 years responded to the sword's presence, awakening from their long slumber. "Automated docking protocols are activating," Torres reported in amazement. "The station is guiding us in." The transport ships settled into docking bays that had been designed for much larger vessels. As soon as the airlocks sealed, atmospheric processors began working to provide breathable air. The Forge world was coming alive around them. Marcus led the group through corridors that had last seen human footsteps when the galaxy was young. Emergency lighting cast long shadows on walls decorated with the golden eagle symbol of the Terran Empire. Holographic displays flickered to life as they passed, showing status reports and facility overviews. In the central command center, Marcus placed his hand on what was obviously the main control interface. The sword at his side pulsed with energy, and suddenly the entire facility was fully operational. Lights blazed throughout the structure. Machinery hummed to life. Computer systems began running diagnostics on equipment that had been perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space. "Welcome back, Imperial Majesty," said a synthetic voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "This facility has been maintained in your absence. All systems are operational and ready for orders." Dr. Kim stared at the displays showing the facility's capabilities. "Marcus, there are enough automated shipyards here to build a fleet, enough weapons to arm them, enough resources to support a war effort that could last for decades." Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on something else. A communication console was showing incoming signals from across the galaxy. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The news of his confrontation with Administrator Vexthol had spread, carried by the hyperspace communication networks that connected human colonies throughout known space. "Your Majesty," came a transmission from a human colony in the Vega system. "We have received word of the Sword's awakening. The people of New Vega stand ready to serve the Empire." "Long live the Emperor," said another transmission from a mining colony in the Outer Rim. "We await your orders." More signals came in as the hours passed. Not from every human world, but from enough of them to matter. The legend of the Imperial Sword had survived in the collective memory of humanity's scattered children. When word spread that the sword had been found and awakened, people began to remember what they had lost. But not everyone was celebrating. Council forces were mobilizing throughout the galaxy. Alien fleets were moving toward human space. The peaceful rebellion Marcus had started was about to become a war that would span star systems. Standing in the command center of an ancient weapons foundry, surrounded by people who looked to him for leadership, Marcus Chen felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He was no longer a miner from a forgotten asteroid station. He was the Emperor of humanity, whether he wanted the title or not. The sword at his side pulsed with warmth, and in that pulse, Marcus heard the voices of his predecessors. 2,000 years of emperors who had fought and died to keep humanity free. They were gone, but their legacy lived on in the weapon he carried. "Computer," he said, his voice echoing in the vast command center. "Begin construction of a new Imperial fleet. We have an empire to rebuild." The construction bays of Forge World Alpha came alive with mechanical symphony as massive robotic arms began assembling the first ships of the new Imperial fleet. Marcus stood on the observation deck, watching automated systems work with precision that amazed even Dr. Kim's scientific mind. In just 72 hours, the skeletal framework of a destroyer was taking shape. "The construction speed is incredible," Kim said, studying her tablet's readings. "These fabrication systems are centuries ahead of anything the Council uses. No wonder the Galactic Council never tried to force their way into the Forge worlds." Marcus nodded, but his attention was divided between the shipyard below and the growing pile of communications from across human space. Not all the news was good. While many colonies had declared for the restored empire, others were reporting Council crackdowns, orbital bombardments, mass arrests. The price of rebellion was being paid in human blood. "Sir," called Pavel, who had taken on the role of communications coordinator despite his background as a simple miner. "We're getting reports from the New Shanghai system. Council forces are conducting raids on suspected Imperial sympathizers." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every death that his actions had caused. When he had drawn the sword in that airlock, he had known there would be consequences, but knowing and experiencing were different things. "How many dead?" he asked. "Estimates range from hundreds to thousands," Pavel replied quietly. "The Council isn't taking any chances. They're treating this as a full-scale rebellion." Dr. Kim placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You couldn't have known it would escalate this quickly." "Couldn't I?" Marcus drew the sword, watching the ancient metal pulse with inner light. "Sometimes I feel like this thing is showing me visions, possible futures, and in too many of them I see battlefields covered with human corpses." "And in how many of them do you see humans living free?" Kim asked. "Sometimes the cost of freedom is measured in blood, Marcus. That doesn't make it wrong to fight for it." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Captain Torres's voice echoed from the communication system. "Multiple hyperspace contacts approaching the Centauri cluster. Council identification codes. Fleet strength estimated at 30 vessels." Marcus looked down at the single destroyer taking shape in the construction bay. Even with the Forge World's advanced technology, it would be weeks before they had a ship capable of fighting. They were trapped with nowhere to run. "Computer," Marcus called to the facility's artificial intelligence. "What defensive capabilities does this station possess?" "Forge World Alpha is equipped with automated defense platforms, particle beam batteries, and a single orbital weapons platform designated as the Hammer of Terra," the synthetic voice replied. "All systems are operational but have not been tested for 2,000 years. Can we hold off 30 Council ships? Probability of successful defense, 37%. Recommend evacuation of non-essential personnel." Marcus looked around the command center at the faces of the men and women who had followed him from Kepler-7. They were miners and technicians, not soldiers. They didn't deserve to die because of his choices. "Begin evacuation procedures," he ordered. "Get everyone to the transport ships." "What about you?" Kim asked. "I stay," Marcus said firmly. "The sword is the key to all of this. If the Council captures it, humanity's chance for freedom dies with me." "Then we stay too," Pavel said, and to Marcus's surprise, nods of agreement came from around the room. "This is crazy," Marcus protested. "You're not soldiers." "Neither are you," Kim pointed out. "But we're all human, and humans don't abandon their emperor." The Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 30 warships arranged in a battle line that stretched across local space. At their head was a massive dreadnought that Marcus recognized from Imperial historical records. The Righteous Fury had once been a Terran Empire flagship, captured during the final battles of the collapse and converted for Council use. "Attention illegal occupants of Imperial Facility Alpha," came the transmission from the dreadnought. "This is Admiral Keth Var of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are in violation of 17 different interstellar laws. Surrender immediately or face destruction." Marcus activated the station's communication array. "This is Emperor Marcus Chen of the Terran Empire. You are trespassing in Imperial space. Withdraw immediately." The alien's translated laughter came back across the channel. "Emperor, you are a mining station worker playing with artifacts beyond your understanding. We will take the sword and use it to ensure no human ever again dreams of challenging Council authority." "Then come and take it," Marcus replied. The Council fleet opened fire simultaneously. Plasma beams and particle streams lanced across space toward the Forge World, but they never reached their target. Ancient defensive shields flared to life around the facility, absorbing the incoming fire and converting it to energy that fed the station's power grid. "Shields holding at 96%, reported the station computer. "Enemy fire is actually strengthening our defensive capabilities." "How is that possible?" Marcus asked. "Imperial shield technology," Dr. Kim said in amazement, studying her sensor readings. The shields don't just deflect energy, they absorb and redirect it. The more they shoot at us, the stronger we become. The Council ships adjusted their tactics, concentrating their fire on single points to try to overwhelm the shields. But the Forge world's defenses had been designed to withstand assault by entire fleets. 30 ships, even modern Council warships, weren't enough. "Activating offensive systems," announced the station computer. "Recommend targeting priority. Enemy command vessel." Marcus hesitated for a moment. Once he gave the order to fire, there would be no going back. This would be open war between humanity and the Galactic Council. "Fire," he said. The hammer of Terra emerged from the station's superstructure, like a sleeping giant awakening. The orbital weapons platform was larger than most Council ships, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements that had been dormant for 2 millennia. When it fired, space itself seemed to burn. The particle beam that lanced out from the hammer was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It didn't travel in a straight line, but curved and twisted through space, guided by targeting systems that could predict and compensate for evasive maneuvers. The beam struck the righteous fury amidships, punching through shields and armor like they were paper. The former Imperial dreadnought exploded in a ball of plasma that lit up the Centauri cluster like a second star. "Target destroyed," reported the computer with mechanical satisfaction. "Adjusting targeting to remaining vessels." The Council fleet scattered, abandoning their formation as the Hammer of Terra turned its attention to the remaining ships. 3 more vessels died in the next 60 seconds, their hulls cracked open by weapons that represented the pinnacle of Imperial engineering. "This is Admiral Kethvar to all Council vessels," came a panicked transmission. "Full retreat! Repeat, full retreat! Imperial weapons are active and hostile." The surviving Council ships fled into hyperspace, leaving behind only expanding clouds of debris and the shocked silence of their own failure. Marcus stared at the tactical display, hardly believing what had just happened. A single ancient weapons platform had defeated 30 modern warships in less than 5 minutes. The technological gap between Imperial and Council technology was even wider than he had imagined. "Sir," Pavel called from the communication station, "we're receiving transmissions from across human space. Word of the battle is spreading." Marcus listened to the reports flooding in. On 12 different human worlds, people were taking to the streets in celebration. Council garrisons were being overwhelmed by popular uprisings. The governor of the Tau Ceti colony had declared independence and requested Imperial protection, but there was darker news as well. The Council was mobilizing reserve fleets from across the galaxy. Alien species that had remained neutral were choosing sides. The small victory at Centauri had sparked something much larger than a human rebellion. It was becoming a galactic civil war. "Dr. Kim," Marcus said, "how long until we have a functional warship?" "The first destroyer will be ready for launch in 4 days," she replied. "But Marcus, 1 ship won't be enough. The Council has thousands." "Then we build more," Marcus said, walking over to the facility's main interface. The sword at his side pulsed as he placed his hand on the control surface. "Computer, what is the maximum production capacity of all 7 Forge worlds?" If all facilities are fully operational, maximum production capacity is approximately 200 vessels per standard month. However, current staffing levels are insufficient for such production rates. Marcus smiled grimly. That problem, at least, had a solution. "Pavel, send a message to every human colony in the galaxy. Tell them the Emperor needs workers, engineers, soldiers, anyone willing to help build the fleet that will free humanity." Over the next week, they came. Not in the hundreds or thousands that Marcus had hoped for, but in the millions. Transport ships arrived daily at the Centauri cluster, bringing refugees from Council-controlled worlds, former Imperial naval officers who had kept their training secret for decades, engineers who had dreamed of working with true Imperial technology. Ordinary people who simply wanted to be part of something greater than themselves. The Forge worlds, abandoned for 2,000 years, began to resemble the bustling industrial centers they had once been. Construction bays that had been dark and silent roared back to life. Shipyard workers who had never seen anything more advanced than cargo haulers found themselves assembling vessels that could challenge Council dreadnoughts. But the most important arrival came on the 8th day. A single small ship that slipped through the outer sensor perimeter and docked at Forge World Alpha without any fanfare or announcement. The person who emerged from that ship changed everything. Marcus thought he knew about the sword and his own destiny. She was old, perhaps 90 years by appearance, but she moved with the grace and confidence of someone much younger. Her hair was silver white, and her eyes held depths that spoke of vast knowledge and terrible secrets. When she approached Marcus in the command center, every conversation stopped. "Your Imperial Majesty," she said, bowing formally. "I am General Helena Voss, formerly of the Imperial Guard. I have been waiting a very long time to meet you." Marcus stared at her. "That's impossible. The Imperial Guard died with the last Emperor 2,000 years ago." "Most of us did," Voss agreed, "but a few survived. A few were tasked with waiting, with watching, with ensuring that when the sword awakened again, its bearer would have the guidance he needed." She gestured to the weapon at Marcus's side. "That blade has been in my family's care for 60 generations. We knew that someday, someone with the right blood and the right spirit would claim it. We just didn't know it would take quite this long." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming protocol. "How did you survive for 2,000 years?" "I didn't," Voss replied with a slight smile. "But my family did. We passed down the knowledge, the duty, the sacred trust from parent to child. Each generation produced at least one guardian of the sword, someone trained in imperial history and military tactics." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying this was all planned? That finding the sword wasn't an accident?" "Not planned," Voss corrected. "Prepared for. The asteroid where you found the sword was seeded with Imperial artifacts centuries ago. We knew that eventually human miners would find it. We didn't know when or who would be worthy to claim it." She looked around the bustling command center, where refugee engineers worked alongside ancient Imperial computers to coordinate the growing fleet. "But I must say, Your Majesty, you've exceeded our most optimistic projections. 7 Forge worlds operational. A fleet under construction. Half of human space rallying to the Imperial banner. The last Emperor would be proud." Marcus drew the sword, studying the ancient symbols etched along its blade. "What aren't you telling me, General? There's more to this than just building ships and fighting the Council." General Voss nodded approvingly. "Perceptive. Yes, there is much more. The sword you carry isn't just a key to Imperial technology. It's a beacon. A signal that reaches across space and time to powers that have been sleeping since the Empire's fall." "What kind of powers?" "The kind that built the Forge worlds in the first place," Voss said quietly. "The kind that allowed humanity to spread across half the galaxy when other species were still learning to use fire. The Council has always wondered how humans achieved such rapid technological advancement. They're about to learn the answer." As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri cluster. But these weren't Council vessels. They were sleek, elegant craft that moved with impossible grace through the void. Their hulls were unmarked, and their technology was beyond anything in the Imperial databases. "Who are they?" Marcus asked, his hand tightening on the sword's grip. "Allies," General Voss replied. "Very old allies who have been waiting for humanity to reclaim its birthright." The mysterious ships approached the Forge worlds in perfect formation, their hulls shimmering with energy patterns that made Marcus's sword pulse in response. As they drew closer, details became visible that defied explanation. The vessels seemed to be grown rather than built, their surfaces flowing like living tissue, yet clearly technological in nature. "They're beautiful," Dr. Kim whispered, staring at the sensor readings. "The energy signatures are unlike anything I've ever seen." General Voss stood at attention as the lead ship docked with Forge World Alpha. "Your Majesty, may I present the architects? Humanity's oldest allies and the true builders of our empire." The airlock opened to reveal beings that were clearly not human, yet not entirely alien either. They stood 8 feet tall on average, with elongated limbs and faces that held an ethereal beauty. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality, and their eyes were pools of liquid silver that seemed to hold the light of stars. The leader stepped forward and spoke in a voice that resonated with harmonics that touched something deep in Marcus's mind. "Emperor of the Terran line," the being said, bowing with fluid grace. "I am Architect Prime Sci-Fi. We have watched humanity's struggle from afar, waiting for the awakening of the Imperial Sword. Your species has endured much in our absence." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "Who are you? What is your connection to humanity?" "Long ago, when your species first reached for the stars, we were there to guide them," Sci-Fi explained. "Humanity showed a potential that impressed even our ancient civilization, a drive for exploration and growth that reminded us of our own youth. We offered partnership, not dominance." General Voss stepped forward. "The architects helped humanity develop faster-than-light travel, advanced weapons, and the technology needed to build an empire. But when the empire began to grow corrupt, when human leaders started using their power for personal gain rather than the benefit of all, the architects withdrew their support. The fall of the Terran Empire was not caused by external enemies," Sci-Fi continued. "It collapsed from within, weakened by greed and political infighting. We retreated to our hidden worlds and waited for humanity to rediscover its better nature." Marcus looked down at the sword in his hands. "And you think I represent that better nature?" "You were a common worker who risked everything to stand up for what was right," the architect replied. "You could have surrendered the sword and returned to your safe, simple life. Instead, you chose to lead a rebellion that has already freed millions of your people. That speaks to the character we once admired in humanity." The implications were staggering. Marcus had thought he was simply fighting to free human colonies from alien oppression. Now he learned that he was part of a cycle spanning thousands of years, a test to see if humanity was worthy of its former glory. "The Council will not accept your return," Marcus said. "They've mobilized fleets from across the galaxy to stop us." Sci-Fi's expression remained serene. "The Galactic Council exists because we allowed it to exist. The alien species that make up its membership gained their technology by scavenging the ruins of civilizations that came before. They have never faced a truly advanced military force." Dr. Kim couldn't contain her scientific curiosity. "How advanced are we talking about?" The architect gestured toward the viewport, where his ships hung in space like silver sculptures. "Our vessels are not built from metal and composite materials. They are cultivated from living crystal that responds to thought and emotion. Their weapons do not fire projectiles or energy beams. They manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself." "Show me," Marcus said. Sci-Fi nodded and spoke in his harmonic language to one of his companions. On the tactical display, a small asteroid at the edge of the system was highlighted. Then it simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed by weapons fire or blown apart by explosives. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if reality had been edited to remove it. "Impressive," General Voss said with professional appreciation. but the Council has numbers on their side. How many ships can the Architects field? Numbers are irrelevant when discussing the Architect fleet, Sci-Fi replied. But that is not why we have returned. We are here to offer humanity a choice. Marcus felt his heart sink. There was always a choice, and it never seemed to be a simple one. The Imperial Sword can be used for more than awakening dormant technology, the Architect continued. It is also a key to the Nexus, a network of gates that connects every habitable world in the galaxy. With the Nexus active, humanity could spread across thousands of worlds in a matter of years rather than centuries. What's the catch? Marcus asked, because there was always a catch. The Nexus was shut down for a reason, Sci-Fi said solemnly. It attracts attention from powers that exist beyond our galaxy, ancient entities that view any expanding civilization as a potential threat. Activating the Nexus would make humanity visible to forces that could destroy not just your empire, but all life in this galaxy. Dr. Kim paled. You're talking about some kind of extragalactic threat? The Devourers, General Voss said quietly. I found references to them in the deepest Imperial archives, beings of pure energy that consume entire star systems. Marcus stared at the sword in his hands, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on him. He could use the weapon to build a fleet and fight a conventional war against the Council. It would be bloody and costly, but humanity might eventually win their freedom through military force. Or he could risk everything on the Nexus, potentially giving humanity instant access to thousands of worlds, but also alerting cosmic horrors to their existence. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Events are already in motion, Sci-Fi replied. Council fleets are converging on human space from 3 different directions. They plan to end this rebellion within the next 72 hours through overwhelming force. If you choose the military path, you must act quickly. Marcus looked around the command center at the faces of the people who had followed him from a mining station to the heart of the galaxy. Pavel, still coordinating communications despite having no formal training. Dr. Kim, whose brilliant mind had made sense of Imperial technology. Captain Torres, who had piloted them through dangers that should have killed them all. And beyond them, the millions of humans who had flocked to the Forge worlds hoping for a chance at freedom. Workers and engineers and soldiers who believed in something they called the Terran Empire, even though they had never lived under it. General Voss, Marcus said, in your opinion, what would the last emperor have done? The elderly woman considered the question carefully. Emperor Matthias was a practical man who believed in taking calculated risks for the greater good, but he was also someone who trusted his instincts even when logic argued against them. Marcus nodded and walked to the main command interface. The sword pulsed with energy as he approached, and for a moment he could swear he heard voices, not the artificial intelligence of the station computer, but something deeper. The echoes of every emperor who had carried this blade, offering their wisdom across the centuries. Computer, he said, placing his hand on the control surface. Display current fleet status. Imperial forces, 137 vessels of various classes. Estimated completion of current construction projects, 18 days. Council forces currently en route, approximately 3,000 vessels. The numbers were stark. Even with Architect's support, they were outnumbered 20-1. A conventional military campaign would be a bloodbath. Display Nexus activation requirements, Marcus ordered. Nexus activation requires Imperial Sword interface with central hub located in the Andromedan system. Warning: Nexus activation will result in galaxy-wide energy signature detectable by extragalactic monitoring systems. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to imagine the choice that lay before him. Safe slavery under Council rule, or dangerous freedom with the risk of attracting cosmic predators. When he put it that way, the decision became clearer. We activate the Nexus, he announced. But first, we prepare for what might come through it. Sci-Fi bowed deeply. A bold choice, Emperor Chen. The architects will assist in your preparations. Over the next 18 hours, the Forge Worlds became a hive of activity, unlike anything seen since the height of the original empire. Human engineers worked alongside architect technicians to retrofit Imperial ships with weapons and shields that could function against extragalactic threats. The construction bays ran at maximum capacity, producing vessels that combined human determination with alien technological sophistication. Marcus barely slept during the preparation period, moving from shipyard to shipyard and consulting with technical teams about defensive strategies. The sword never left his side, and he was beginning to understand that the weapon was more than just a key or symbol. It was a repository of knowledge, containing the accumulated wisdom of every emperor who had wielded it. As the deadline approached, reports came in of Council fleets massing at the edge of human space. 3 massive battle groups, each larger than anything ever assembled in galactic history. They would arrive at Centauri within hours of each other, turning the system into the largest space battle ever fought. Final fleet status? Marcus asked, as he took his position in the command center of the newly constructed flagship Restoration. 149 Imperial vessels ready for combat, reported Admiral Torres, promoted from transport captain to fleet commander. 23 architect ships in support. All personnel have been briefed on Nexus activation procedures. Marcus nodded and activated the fleet communication system. This is Emperor Marcus Chen to all Imperial and Allied vessels. Today we make a choice that will determine the future of humanity for generations to come. We can accept the chains the Council offers, or we can reach for something greater. He paused, looking through the bridge viewport at the vast fleet assembled around him. Ships crewed by former miners and factory workers and colonial administrators. People who had never dreamed they would be part of something like this. 2,000 years ago, humanity ruled half the galaxy because we dared to dream of something better than what we had. Today, we reclaim that dream, not for power or conquest, but for the simple right to determine our own destiny among the stars. The first Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace as he spoke, their ships darkening local space like a plague of locusts. More would follow soon. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump to the Andromedan system, Marcus ordered. It's time to open the door to humanity's future. The combined human and architect fleet vanished into hyperspace just as the Council forces opened fire on empty space. Behind them, automated defenses at the Forge Worlds would hold the line for as long as possible. Ahead lay either salvation or damnation. Marcus gripped the Imperial sword as reality shifted around them, knowing that whatever happened next would echo across the galaxy for millennia to come. The rusty blade he had found in an asteroid had indeed changed everything. Now it remained to be seen whether that change would be humanity's greatest triumph or its final doom. In hyperspace, surrounded by the light of distant stars, Marcus Chen prepared to either crown himself as the greatest emperor in human history or become the man who had doomed his species to extinction. The sword pulsed with ancient power, and in that pulse he heard the whispered promise of destiny fulfilled.